Apocalyptic emergency alert, adult imagery flashing over kids' programming, and stations overtaken with propaganda. These are mysterious live TV interruptions that have never been explained. In 1977, viewers in Madison, Wisconsin, watching The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, experienced something completely unexpected. The broadcast was suddenly interrupted by this unknown video signal that replaced the show. There's never been a recording of the interruption released. The hijacked footage reportedly showed unrelated video that had nothing to do with NBC programming. After a short time, normal programming resumed, as if nothing had happened. What made this case strange is how little information ever came about afterward. The station acknowledged that there had been this unauthorized signal intrusion, but they never released any details aside from that. At the time, though, overriding a broadcast signal required what's called a line of sight access to transmission paths or relay equipment, meaning whoever did this must have known exactly how the station's setup worked. So it was either an insider or someone who just had a lot of technical knowledge of broadcast engineering. There's a case about interruptions on stations in Detroit during the mid-80s, but the internet's frustratingly thin when it comes to exactly what viewers saw. What is known is that people in Detroit at the time reported their TV picture suddenly becoming distorted, the clear broadcast breaking up, flickering, and then showing imagery that didn't come from the station's own programming. This lasted for a while before finally returning to normal. Apparently, it had nothing to do with the weather or technical trouble or some internal station error. The interruption was something forced into the feed, but why? There was no clear message, there was no slogan or overlaid graphic or audio saying anything. It was just random visuals replacing the normal show for a moment. That's what separates it from a lot of the other hijacks on this list, where someone tries to make some kind of a point or just prank everyone. That's more on that later. Instead, this felt like someone poking at the system rather than trying to broadcast a message. An investigation was opened at the time, but nothing ever came of it. But this was WJBK, a major station. So the idea that someone could physically interrupt the signal without leaving a trace was kind of a big deal. In the early 80s, people watching HBO in various parts of the US started noticing something strange as well. During regular programming, the picture would sometimes drop out of the scheduled lineup and briefly show totally unrelated video or static, often with distorted sound. These interruptions bounced in and out without warning. Because HBO and other networks were being delivered by satellite back then, some people suspected the disruptions weren't just local cable issues, but something hitting the network before it even reached cable systems. The way the feeds worked at the time meant that someone with access to satellite uplinks or relay paths could theoretically inject a signal upstream, whatever the hell all that means. But it would cause the viewer to see something unexpected. As for what the hacker or hackers were trying to do, though, who knows? There didn't seem to be any purpose behind them. They didn't repeat at the same times, they didn't target specific shows or networks. It didn't come with any text or voice explaining why they appeared. On November 22nd, 1987, viewers in Chicago were watching the 9 o'clock news on WGN-TV. And the signal suddenly cut out. Instead of the news anchor, a person wearing a Max Headroom mask appeared on screen, standing in front of a corrugated metal background. There was no sound at first, just the image flickering in and out before the station finally got control back. About 2 hours later, it happened again though, and this time it was during a Doctor Who episode. And the hijacker had audio now, and oh boy, is it glorious. I so badly want to meet the person who pulled this off. The guy started delivering jokes and went on some nonsensical rant. At one point, a second person off camera hits the masked man with a fly swatter. The interruption lasted nearly 90 seconds before the station cut the feed. Now, this is a very famous case. I'm sure all of you are well aware of it, and there's a reason for that. It just doesn't happen very often. What made this especially unsettling is that hijacking a broadcast signal like this required serious technical knowledge and pretty expensive equipment. This was not a prank someone pulled off in their bedroom. Engineers figured, and this is going to sound like Star Trek technobabble, but they figured the hijacker overpowered the station's microwave relay signal, something only a handful of people in the area could realistically do at the time. To this day, nobody knows who did it, why they did it, or how they did it. Imagine chilling out on a regular afternoon, maybe watching the Steve Wilkos show, when suddenly your TV flashes this strange emergency alert. Only it isn't about a tornado or an Amber Alert. Instead, it's describing the bodies of the dead rising from their graves and attacking the living. On February 11th, 2013, people across the US were watching normal daytime TV when the screen suddenly cut to an emergency alert. And it was exactly what I just described. It sounded like the same system used for real disasters, except it was about zombies. It was on screen for a while. Gotta assume some people actually started freaking out, especially all those folks with bunkers full of canned food, but then programming snapped back to normal. Turned out hackers had broken into station equipment that was badly secured and used it to send these fake alerts, but they never found out who actually did this. In September 1985, during communist rule in Poland, 4 astronomers in the city of Torun did something extraordinary. They hijacked the state TV signal and replaced normal programming with text messages supporting the Solidarity movement, a labor union and political group fighting against government oppression. The messages criticized rising food prices, the government's lies, and the control that they had over everyone's lives. It was a direct political protest. People couldn't believe what they were looking at. The state controlled all broadcasting, and independent messages were almost impossible to show. Pulling this off required technical knowledge of the broadcasting system. The astronomers had figured out how to override the state transmitter and insert their messages live. The interruption lasted only a few minutes, but it was long enough to be noticed by thousands of viewers. Eventually, the 4 were caught and prosecuted, but the broadcast became legendary because it was one of the first live TV signal hijacks used explicitly as a political protest, unlike some other less serious hijacks on this list. On January 4th, 2000, kids in the Philippines were watching Teletubbies on GMA Network, which was one of the most popular children's shows on TV at the time. We all know the Teletubbies, as much as some of us would want to forget it. I know a number of folks who grew up with this show and thought it was just some strange fever dream they had, but right in the middle of the broadcast, the show cut out for a few seconds. Instead of the weird, multicolored aliens with pure black eyes kids were used to gawking at, the screen showed a still image of Rosanna Rosas, who was widely known in the Philippines at the time for adult roles and some adult film work. No, she was not making a guest appearance on the Teletubbies. This was obviously not supposed to air during a kid's time slot. The interruption was short, but it didn't matter. Parents noticed immediately. Kids noticed. People called the station asking what had just happened. The image vanished, Teletubbies came back on, and the show continued as if nothing had happened. Turned out that the wrong clip was loaded or triggered during live transmission somehow, and because it was live, it went straight to air. Even years later, this gets brought up as one of the strangest, most uncomfortable live TV mistakes in Philippine broadcast history. On November 10th, 2017, people in Malmö, Sweden tuned in to Mix Megapol, a major commercial radio station. Normally, it's non-stop music, DJs, ads, the usual, but that morning, listeners started hearing something completely different. The station had been pushed off its own frequency. For about 30 minutes, the normal broadcast was replaced by an unauthorized transmission playing propaganda. Anyone listening in the area heard the takeover instead of Mix Megapol's programming. Someone had used a pirate radio transmitter strong enough to overpower the station's signal in that area. As long as that transmitter stayed on, the real station couldn't reach listeners. After about half an hour, the hijacked signal finally stopped and Mix Megapol came back on the air. That was the end of it. They never caught who did it. On November 26, 1977, viewers across southern England were watching the evening news when something went wrong. Very wrong. The picture stayed normal, but the audio was suddenly taken over by a deep, calm, distorted voice that identified itself as Vrilon, a representative of the Ashtar Galactic Command. And for over 5 minutes, the voice delivered a strange message claiming to come from space. It warned humanity about nuclear weapons and the negative impact we lowly humans were having on the environment, urging people to abandon their weapons and live in peace. Now, obviously this was not a studio mistake. Someone had overridden the broadcast audio signal, which again meant whoever this was knew exactly what they were doing. Investigators also believed the hijacker had to be physically nearby to pull this off, but nobody was ever identified or charged. Decades later, it's still one of the craziest broadcast interruptions in history. I have been your host, James, for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.